Hello and welcome to another edition of Storytelling on Orchard Street. I'm your host, Pete Salamita. I'm in the P T Knitwear bookstore podcast studio on 180 Orchard Street in the Lower East Side of New York City. Thank you for tuning in. Looking forward to sharing some poetry with you. And then a little bit later, Serge Rodriguez, the general manager of the podcast studio here at P&T, will join me and we'll talk about his life and his experiences growing up in the Lower East Side. So I'm looking forward to that. I had a guest, but weather-related cancellation. This is an old, This is an old picture of my parents from, I'm guessing, early 50s. It might be before or around the time they had my oldest brother. And I looked at the photo and I said to myself, you know, they lived into the 90s. Of course, I've known them all my life. That's stupid. But I looked at the picture and I'm like, wow, you know, I don't know those people. Like, I don't know I know my parents, but I don't know what they were like there and then at that given moment, which is kind of what photography does. It captures a moment. And if you're not in that moment, you're not. But one thing so I wrote a poem. I'm just going to read it, and it's kind of self-explanatory. It's called Old Family Selfie. And yes, it was a selfie, right? We didn't invent selfies now when we got cell phones. They've been around for a while. Okay, so this is a old family selfie. Who are you, young man, holding your brownie camera to the mirror, with your thick curly hair, your beaming wife, smiling because of love? And the click that captured it. Life was easier then, when everything felt new, responsibilities not yet in view. Providing for a big family was something not yet true, just a dream talked about. I knew a different you, the one who had to work. There was little time to relax. You just did what you had to do so your family had a good life. The only reward was self-pride. Looking at this photo, I can't help but wonder, what was it like for you when things got tough and all that weight was on your shoulders, just for you and the love of your life to count on? We sit at the dining room table many years later, understanding it's a different time. You lived a long and good life, but your best left this earth with your loving wife. Somehow you carry on, and I think I now know better who you are. Yes, my mom passed away first, and somehow my father carried on in a pretty grand and noble way. So that was kind of a personal thing. A lot of my poetry is not that personal. It's just observations about the world around me. So the next one I'd like to read is called Walking on Eggshells. A few weeks ago, there was a prison break that had made the news, and I wrote a poem it's just loosely based on that. I don't know the complete particulars of what happened with that, but this is called Walking on Eggshells. Prison break, killer on the loose, guards were asleep or in on the take. Searchlights find nothing, bloodhound lost the trail, town folk on alert. It's downright dirty shame, someone said. A young mother cried out and swaddled her infant son. Jack, the counterman at the diner, said the sheriff was not himself, missed his morning Joe and prune Danish. Ginny at the general store closed early. Better to be safe than sorry, she exclaimed. This is small town, rural USA, that survives on the prison folk, workers, visitors, and the like. Crime doesn't pay to the one that gets caught committing it, but there's money to be made for the rest of us, they'll tell you. Sometimes you pay for it when things go south, and the specter of death comes from breezes coming off tops of tall grass that could hide out a murderer, and shadows cast under the moonlight seems ominous, knowing he is out there somewhere. There's an all-out manhunt that has seen too many sunrises and sunsets, and that spins this small town almost upside down from an already frazzled state. Walking on eggshells can crack a man's soul, and that of an already stressed out community trying to survive in a USA small town. I feel a little weird being in the studio and reading by myself. I'm used to interviewing people and letting them read. I'm just going to read a couple more, and then hopefully Serge will catch up to me. He is working here at the bookstore, so I appreciate him taking the time to join the podcast. This one is called Night Crawlers. I don't understand the sunshine. Better to be hidden in shadows or in the dark of a theater without a show to watch. I think of something elusive, not within my limited grasp of reality. I count the hours, the minutes, and the seconds that will allow me to come out, no longer hidden inside. The city is less scary in the dark. I can blend in with my fellow night crawlers who have something to say and do. Now that dusk has passed, we can move around freely, under cover except the harsh street lights. It's time to bare your soul, stir emotions in strangers that you've just barely met, in a room that smells like cheap whiskey with the beat of mostly forgotten old pop songs blaring on the speakers. Home sweet home for this aged man who's just trying his best to be a legend in his own mind. I think I wrote something yesterday or today that I don't have a printout of that might be worth a read. Yes, this is being improvised. I'm usually very... I like this one. This is an old one, actually. This one's called The Golden Rule. I'm usually more organized because when I have a guest, I spend a lot of time thinking of questions and what I'm going to read when I read with them. Anyway, it's more planned out. This one's show's completely improvised, and hopefully it doesn't stink. The Golden Rule. Man of faith. He believed he was a man of faith. Everyone marveled at the man of faith. The pastor leaned on the man of faith. He carried himself in such a way, confident to face the day, buttoned up his collar, locked his attaché case, drove a clean, righteous car, and had impeccably landscaped lawn, not a weed in sight. He didn't suffer fools, the non-believers. There's only black and white. He didn't believe in gray. But the wagon came unhinged when he created scandal, and small-town tongues wagged. Rumors spread like wildfire. His wife was shunned at the middle school open house. His son taunted on the bus. His monthly card game fell apart. You judge people harshly, they return the favor tenfold. How do you set things straight when you've broken the golden rule that you so regularly touted? Usually I'm on stage, I would say thank you very much. It seems so quiet in here. Anyway, this one's called Practice. I wrote it after seeing a performer in one of the many places I attend for my art. The skin on her back was taut, and her long hair moved in waves like an ocean during a storm. As she moved, her bow across the strings on her Stradivarius. Its wooden body was like a lover that she caressed until it bent to her will and cried out on stage. Her fingers lovingly moved up and down its neck with aplomb. Her forgotten as the crack on her knuckles when she was just 5 because the notes she played weren't quite right. Beautiful melodies filled the air as the audience sat in silent awe, not aware of the meaning of her song. With her body half turned on stage, she was deep in trance. It's who she is as a woman after the pain from all those years of sacrifice, of not being able to be a child. But she persevered because what else was there? Her figure, cut by all the time spent alone, making blisters by practicing her songs until the day became night, and the night spent lonely until dawn. The concert ended as she cradled her instrument carefully into its case, and she stepped outside the venue into the mist of the city, mostly sleeping, lifting her hand to catch a cab. She released the stored body tension and let out a sigh. Her studio apartment on the Lower East Side, in all its emptiness, was her place to go to now, and after the curtain was finally dropped. So I'm going to take a short pause and then see where we are at with my guest. Okay, so I'm back. I'm still waiting for Serge, and time is kind of running by, and I have to be out of here at a certain time. So I'm going to do a little more of the show without him. I left the door open, just why not? So you can kind of hear the background music in the store, and hopefully Serge will pop in quickly and easily with the door open. Somebody's having a good time out there. So I had something happen this morning that was kind of embarrassing, somewhat funny now that I'm telling the story, and very educational. So we just had our kitchen renovated. It's almost completed, and I'm in the kitchen. I think I was making a cake, actually. And my wife came down to put a load of laundry in the washing machine, and we have a gas setup. And she turns it on, walks out, and I'm standing near the washer, and I think I smell rotten eggs. So I call my wife down, and she goes, I smell it too. So we call 911, and they tell us, they hook me up to the fire department, and they send the fire department, And while I'm waiting for the fire department to come, we grab our cats. I wake my son up, first of all, which usually takes a long time. But when I told him we're evacuating because we think there's a gas leak, he got up pretty quickly. I might have to try that again someday when we need him to do something. We pack up the cats. Luckily, they were all on the same floor, so they couldn't escape. And they were kind of all in one place. We brought up 4 carriers, put them in the carriers, went outside, got coats on, all that kind of stuff. Fire department comes. They walk throughout the house with meters. And they say everything's okay. And subsequently, then the gas company comes. And he comes in, and he said, well, we have better meters. Next time, just directly call the gas company. And my wife said, well, I told you. But I was so panicked, I must have tuned her out. And she was trying to call the gas. That part of it is another story. It was kind of weird, so we were in a weird mode. So he goes throughout the house, he goes downstairs, and he said there actually was a small leak by the meter, but that's not what we were smelling. He said, that's something else. Gas does not smell like that. Unfortunately, that's what you see in some commercials. They say it smells like rotten eggs, and if you smell that, you might want to evacuate your house like we did. And he said, no, it smells like if you turn on the stove and the pilot light is not lit and you get that kind of, that weird smell. That's what it smells like. And so there was not a leak. He said that when it rains really hard, sometimes, the sewer line kind of maybe backs up, or you're getting that, and that might have been kicked off by turning the washer on. Is it funny in retrospect? I don't know. But we did learn something. We learned that gas does not smell like rotten eggs if you have a gas leak. And if you think you have a gas leak, call the gas department, the gas company right away. So that's the lesson for the day. I'm going to read something else. This might be a solo show, and that's not the worst thing. So I read that. I didn't read that, but I'm not sure I want to read that. So I'm going to read this one. It's called Ancestor Respect. Living ancestors walking among us past abandoned storefronts, over broken glass and empty lots where weeds grow tall and dreams crash and fall. Crying ancestors hover over sidewalks outlined in chalk. Strewn bullet casings tells a story often told to the tears of us all. Hopeful ancestors dance in shadows on graffiti-marked brick walls, begging the spirits to rise in the disenfranchised who yearn for peace and love for all. It's raining really hard out there. I think that's one of the reasons why my guest canceled. The weather was really bad, and she comes from kind of far. So this next one is called Something Bigger, and I was inspired to write this after seeing a documentary where no, I'll just read it. Maybe it's obvious. I held my Nikon still. I looked into the lens but didn't click. Something about her expression, a sadness in her eyes, of living in this place built on a history of lies. She traveled far looking for something bigger than herself, ended up settling down and just working hard. Raised a family on barely a dime, got through struggles with love and laughter, making sure to provide comfort to a family of 5. Now it's her time to live a quiet life and reflect on days gone by. She did her best, no reason to cry, being alone at this age, knowing that her offspring all survived, past the shadows of ignorance and hate, hold value in her heart and mind. I think it was a documentary about the struggles that immigrants go through, especially first generation. I didn't bring that many pieces with me because I didn't think I was going to have to read that much. I could get out my book, which is over there over there on the other side of the room. I can't reach it from here though. So let me go back and see what's on my phone. I don't know if this is entertaining. I really, I did broadcasting back in the day, and I don't mind talking in front of a microphone. Back then it was, I was a DJ and I did music, so I talked and played music. This is a little different. And, perfect timing. The man of the hour, Serge. So I introduced you as Serge Rodriguez, the general manager of the podcast studio. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Good. Oh, you know what? Before we forget,
Sure.
I like to take a selfie of my guests so I can
That's a great idea.
on Instagram. I can post it. There we go. You watch your phone. Okay, now do one serious. Perfect. I'm so glad you popped in.
Thank you for having me on.
This is great. I've been wanting to do this for a long time.
I know. I'm glad that this is the right day for it too, especially with all the rain coming down. It's sort of very cozy in here,
Right.
Yeah.
First off, I want to thank you so much for this. I love this.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
We've been wanting to get this together for a while.
It's
Finally made it happen.
It's perfect. Look, we can see each other.
It changes the atmosphere of the studio completely.
It really does. So
Yeah.
kudos to you and the staff.
Thank you. I'm working on a couple things to hopefully make this space a little bit easier to use, navigate, and upgrade the quality of the productions that happen in
Right.
here.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. And again, thank you for the studio and all you do. And I consider myself lucky to have this opportunity.
Well, you're you're one of the early adopters.
I'm OG.
Yeah, you got in here. You have a great flow of guests, I must say, too. You're pretty popping when you come in here. And I'm glad that this was something that grew out of Wayne's Monday night series, because I think I met you there.
Wayne was the kickoff for me. And
Wayne Crawl?
Yeah, Wayne Crawl, first floor walk up.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that night there were, I've said this before, but Philip Giambri and Linda, Pauline Finley was reading, but they were there, Philip Giambri and Linda Kleinbub. And I'm going to be doing a reading here for Wayne October 9th, Monday, coming up in a few weeks, and they're both going to be reading.
That's great.
So it's kind of like almost
like a
year.
reunion.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I'm going to have a
ago.
guitarist with me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, Fredo Genziano, who does the theme song for,
that's
for the show.
awesome.
Yeah,
that's so great.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you about, we could talk about a lot of things, but you grew up in the Lower East Side.
I did.
Right where in this neighborhood where we are, right?
Yeah. I actually still in a rent-stabilized apartment that was in the family. My dad was a super of our building. I grew up on 4th Street and 2nd Ave. Went to high school on Stanton Street, just a couple blocks away from here.
Right.
But yeah, I've been in the neighborhood a long time.
Right.
I've seen a lot of changes.
Is it like a full circle, kind of weird for you to be working right here where you grew up?
No, because I think that it feels right.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy being an adult, being able to contribute back to the neighborhood and create, partially be a part of creating something that can integrate not just the people that live on this block, but like a lot of the artists and other community members that we have that use this space.
Right.
It's deeply fulfilling to me.
Yeah, it must be great. And again, right here, P T Knitwear bookstore, 180 Orchard Street. It's a great bookstore. They have a cafe in the back, and they do all kinds of great events. So it's a great place for you to to come and work every day, right?
I'm enjoying it. Yeah, absolutely. I think, with opening any business, you're going to be busting your butt.
Right.
And it's a labor of love, but this is what I love doing, like talking to people, bringing them into the space, the studio in particular.
Were you hired before it was open and you were part of the opening, or did you come later?
Yeah, I was hired as a lead bookseller, which is sort of like a manager.
Right.
And then, I've worked in a lot of different places, so I wasn't surprised about moving up. But my goal when I interviewed was I need to get myself into the podcast studio.
Oh, okay.
I had my sights set on this.
Did you have any broadcast background?
Not any broadcast background. I was a vinyl DJ for a number of years.
Oh,
so
okay. Mobile DJ or radio DJ?
Mobile.
I would just I did that too.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Well, I was on 3 college radio stations.
Oh, that's cool.
I loved it.
Where and what stations?
So I started at Newport's. I went there for a year.
Oh, cool.
And I kicked myself out because Newport in 1975 was a wild place.
I can imagine.
And weird is I didn't know it was known as a party school. I don't know how I missed that.
Yeah.
And I was, 17 turning 18, and I did more partying than.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's what I was doing at that time, too.
But you know what? That one year I made friends I'm still friends with to this day. And this is 1975. I did radio shows, so I found my love of radio.
Yeah.
I was on a stage crew.
That's cool.
And I played the drums for the first time. So all those things I've done throughout my life. So that one year, and all the friends I have.
Yeah.
So
memorable.
Yeah.
And it creates sort of this like lifelong. Were you a musician too?
I'm a drummer. I don't really play drums anymore. I really do mostly poetry and poetry with music.
I love that.
I recently did a couple of gigs, but I feel kind of out of that loop a little bit, but you never know.
Yeah.
So you did mobile DJing. How'd you get into that?
Man, I've always been sort of like a nerd with music, and I feel pretty lucky that, my dad wasn't necessarily into music even really, but he was a filmmaker.
Oh, okay.
And he really lovingly, but, firmly made sure that myself and my brothers understood things.
How many brothers do you have?
I have 2 older brothers.
Okay.
Like understood like signal.
Right.
And from the time we were kids, it's still kind of like, like he got trained as like an electrical engineer and worked in the film industry for a long time too. But, so he wanted us to understand how to take things apart, put things back together again. And
which comes in handy here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And staying like enthusiastic about it, because sometimes it can be very frustrating.
Sure.
For sure, you know. But also with that too, my brothers, they're a bit older than I am. They grew up, this year is actually Hip Hop 50, the 50th anniversary of hip hop.
Right, that was a big deal.
Yeah, so they grew up collecting records, break dancing, doing all that kind of stuff. And I inherited all of their hand-me-downs.
Nice.
So
oh, man, you must have a nice collection. You're talking about vinyl, right?
Yeah,
of course.
I got super into buying it later.
Right.
My brothers would like make mix CDs for me.
Do you still DJ?
I occasionally do stuff at Parkside Lounge. Like, I have a good friend that runs a cabaret called Unprofessional, and it happens every, I think it's like every 4 months, 4 months, something like that. It's like a seasonal thing.
So you DJ'd at clubs?
Yeah, I did this bar called Vaughn on Bleecker Street.
Okay.
It's like a basement club area. I was a part of a DJ collective, this party that happened every so often. It was open format, so you could play whatever you wanted. But I typically played a lot of like funk, soul, disco.
This is crazy. I've known you for over a year, and I didn't know this.
Yeah, well, I vinyl, lugging it around.
I know. Do you still have the vinyl?
I have all the vinyl.
How many albums do you think you have?
I would say probably like maybe close to 400.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got you beat, man. I got about over 3,000 albums.
Oh no, I believe it. I have down.
And then when CDs came out, everybody's you don't need vinyl anymore. Yeah. Then I went out crazy and bought CDs. I got about double the same amount of that.
I totally understand that, because that's what I was into for a long time too.
Right.
So, and my dad also, like, that's where we got started with everything. He collected like analog cameras,
Wow.
VCRs. He'd always be repairing stuff. So you pick up a lot of things. He also, when I was building out my DJ, I had 2 Techniques turntables.
Okay.
He helped me build everything out,
Right.
understand like how to.
Do you still have the equipment?
Yeah, I do.
You know, I do too, but I don't know what to do with it because I'm not really doing it anymore.
I don't know. I mean, there's that thing where people say never sell your records.
Right. I know. I still have the records. I don't.
Yeah.
I you know what? I every once in a while I say, if suddenly I had to move.
Yeah.
And to a smaller place, I can't move 3,000 albums and 3,000 CDs, and I also have a couple boxes of cassettes and 45s. But no, I meant the DJ equipment. I don't see myself doing mobile DJing anymore.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a
takes
labor
up a lot
of
of space
love.
too.
Yeah. I mean, and nowadays I understand why people do digital. It wasn't that I was against it, but working with material, like touching a record, is such
feels different, right? And the size of it, and the artwork and everything. And I loved I love the feel of the turntable. I never did digital.
Yeah, I can't get into it. It just doesn't work for me. It's not the same. I like the tactile feeling.
Right.
I also love, it's like, the same with books. Like these are, vehicles of transmission of music, of culture, but also they're like art objects too. And that to me is super appealing.
I also never got into digital books. I read articles on my phone, but books, I like the book.
I've been doing some audiobooks lately, which is okay because I listen to podcasts or, whatever. It's not bad. It's useful.
I guess it's good if you're on the move, you're going somewhere.
Well, when I'm like cleaning in the house and I want to I want to knock out a book or something like that, but I prefer to have a physical book. It just feels easier on the eyes, and I feel like I comprehend more because I actually hold it and can get in there, point to it, touch it. With my phone, I don't know that I really want to be on my phone like that.
So I just remember, I'm sorry I'm not forgetting the whole thing, but I could have sworn you showed me a book inside with a picture of your mother in it.
That's actually my grandmother.
Oh, your grandmother.
Yeah. No, but you are on the money. That was my maternal grandmother. So basically, my family, my mother's side of the family has been in New York like 2 or 3 generations. Okay. My grandfather, my mother's father, was born in the area they call Vinegar Hill now in Brooklyn. Okay. And
which is it's like near the Manhattan Bridge, right?
Yeah. It's
near Dumbo.
Dumbo. Yes, exactly. Dumbo's on one side, and then Brooklyn Heights is on the other side. Right. Yeah. Right. For a while though, it didn't really have like a name. That was just sort of like
it's a way to get people to rent expensive apartments.
Into real estate. Yeah, I think it might have been like a term associated with all the like merchant Marines and sailors and stuff in that area, but. It was a colloquialism. It wasn't something that turned into like let's develop this area and sell it to the highest bidder, Right. That's definitely that's the history of down here too.
So I moved into Brooklyn in 1979, but you grew up in the Lower East Side. I mean, you must have seen so much change. I mean, you go around here now, right across the street is a pizzeria that's considered the best in the world. Did you know that? Did you know that? I don't know if it's true.
Well, what's interesting is that when I was growing up over here, on the corner, there's another pizzeria. That's not the one that used to be there when I was growing up. It was called Rosario's. That was the best pizza in the Lower East Side.
But I mean the one not on the corner, off the corner.
I know exactly which one you mean.
It's kind of, high class one.
That one's only open like 3 days a week after a certain time. They have people line up outside. Right. I'm like, I don't like to wait in line like that.
No, me neither.
That's not my jam.
No, I don't like it either.
Yeah.
And I think there's places around here that you can go to that probably have $30, $40 entrees or whatever. It's like
that's
something. Could you imagine that growing up as a kid, seeing this?
No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I came of age like I was 18 in the year 2000. So the late 90s is when I was in high school and junior high over here. Right. And there was definitely a presence of artists, like there had always been. Right. But I don't think I could ever have imagined it sort of like capitulating the way in which it did. Right. Because downtown always had artists,
right.
Yeah,
but of course.
It didn't necessarily mean that everything was going to change into some sort of like luxury, like neighborhood, Right. I mean, it's hard to say too, because it's like that's happening in a lot of parts of New York? I mean,
all over. Honestly, my wife and I bought a house in South Slope in 1999.
Wow.
We lived in a studio apartment together for a really long time, and we were able to save money. To be honest with you, if we didn't buy that house, it was like the last of the houses affordable in that neighborhood. I don't know where we'd be because it's ridiculous now. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
It's so expensive to live in New York.
It's too much. Yeah, I know that the building I'm in is probably going to be sold soon, but I mean, I have a 2-year lease, so after that, though, I'm just like,
you got to make your plans.
I'm starting now. Actually, I have to start thinking about what's going to happen with that because I definitely think whoever ends up buying it is going to try to kick everything.
Sure,
out,
of course, right.
It's like all rent stabilized people and some rent control people in that building.
That's not going to go good, probably.
I don't think so.
Right.
I mean, I'm trying to mentally prepare myself for that. It does feel like it is sort of an unfortunate reality if you don't have like property here, you know, in New York.
Tell me a favorite memory of the neighborhood for you.
I think what I really always loved about this neighborhood is the amount of people that were on the street talking to each other.
Wow. Okay.
It was much.
It felt like a neighborhood.
It did,
right.
And it also it didn't feel like a neighborhood like in sort of a humdrum way where you see the same people and it's like the same bullshit. Like on Avenue A.
It wasn't Harry and Oz.
No, absolutely not. But on like Avenue A,
most people won't know that reference.
Yeah. I knew it from reruns. I definitely grew up watching that stuff on TV. But I remember like on Avenue A, you know, in the 90s, because you had so many people that worked in the music industry as well as in publishing, you would find on the street people just put like sampler CDs of the latest artists to come out, you know, for whatever label.
Right.
And same with books. You'd find advanced review copies of certain books. And then the guys that would like resell stuff, they'd have like a blanket on the street.
Oh,
and they'd sell everything.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what I used to love about all of downtown, like Avenue A, parts of 2nd Avenue. You could basically walk anywhere and find something cool that somebody was hawking on the street. Since I was a little kid, I remember that.
Right. Did you have to be tough to grow up here?
I think so. Yeah. I definitely put like a real stank face on when I was walking on the block by
stank
myself.
Face.
Yeah. I mean, for a long time, I remember in the 80s, my parents didn't allow me to walk on Avenue B by myself.
Right.
Because of...
well, the further you went into the alphabet, the worse it got.
That's what everybody said.
Right.
But I think it was because of the Tompkins Square riots that
happened.
Oh yeah,
that was that. That was
yeah. I grew up playing in that playground, and
but especially in like from my early recollection, you know, the 80s into the 90s, there was you know a lot of problems especially up there, you know. East Village and Alphabet City, you know, poverty and crime and drugs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, also a lot of buildings that had gone
burned
up in
down.
Flames because the landlords were making money on the insurance.
Exactly.
Yeah,
there was a lot of that.
That happened in so many parts of New York. I mean, Park Slope was like that too.
Right.
You know, because Park Slope used to be a much more racially diverse working class neighborhood too.
When I moved in '79, definitely so. I mean, the middle, like the 7th Avenue, the richer part of Park Slope was not.
That's always been.
But the outskirts were.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there were a lot of Latino, Hispanic people. There were Polish people. There were. Yeah.
Did you ever hear about that? There was that brothel in Park Slope that was on. I think it was. It wasn't on. I think it was like 7th Avenue. And it was in one of those old brownstones, and they had a red light bulb that they would turn on.
I had no idea.
Yeah, a friend of mine had told me about it who grew up over there and was just like, yeah, this was here like all of my childhood.
Right.
Which is kind of wild. And also it's like a lot of old New York operated like that too.
Wow, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I missed the brothel. Not that I would have attended.
Probably for the best, yeah.
So you grew up, and did you ever move out, like to go to college or to just move away? Or
yeah, I did. I went to Bard College for a split second there in upstate New York, and I went out west for a little while. I dropped out of college because I just didn't do well in that environment. I think I'm like deeply a city person.
Right.
I mean, I do love when I get a chance to travel and see, you know, the natural world.
Right.
But I think I just thrive. I'm sort of wound up the way a lot of New Yorkers
Sure.
are, where you kind of have to hit the pavement.
Right.
So upstate New York wasn't really
too chill for you, huh?
It was aggressively chill. It just was like so out of the way.
Right.
and sort of isolated. And then, I dropped out, and then I was kind of bopping around New York State. I worked on a couple farms. I sort of was doing a lot of stuff. I lived in
You were a farmer.
I was, yeah. I lived in Albany, New York for
How
a
did
little
a
while.
boy from the city become a farmer?
Well, you know what? When I was in college, I got into gardening, and I also worked for the grounds crew that did like some landscaping at the college.
Wow.
And I really liked it. And I was at that
So
point.
here it is. I'm finding out you were a DJ,
yeah.
a landscaper, a gardener.
I have a couple different.
What else am I going to find out
Well,
about?
maybe you might find out a lot more. I have a lot of different lives I lived.
Right.
I mean, I'm 40, but I think there's a lot of living you do when you're young that you don't really figure out until much later. You go,
right.
Oh, well, I actually did something instead of just thinking that you were sort of a dumb kid,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially at that age, because it's like really like signing up to go to college, going into debt potentially,
right?
Doing the same thing that you've been like raised to do, which is go to school,
right,
and follow somebody else's rules. You just want to get out on your own, you
right?
know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did that.
I feel you.
When I dropped out. Yeah, I left. Went to California. Went to Oregon State.
Was there a
around.
reason you went out there, or just did you know somebody, or you just said, "I'm going to go to California"?
I did the thing that I think a lot of New York teenagers fantasize about doing, go west, because somehow California represents like freedom. And even like when I think about all the beats, the stuff I grew up reading,
sure,
everybody goes west because it's like this completely different environment,
right? And what part of California?
I was in Southern California. I was in the Bay Area, and then I was in moved up to Klamath Falls area, like southwest.
Were you ever in LA?
Yeah, I stayed in LA for a little while. I had a couple friends out there, so it was cool. It was very
so California is so different from New York City too. I mean, so you went
yeah.
upstate, and that's very different, but California is very different also.
I liked it though because I really wanted to see something completely different than New York City.
Sure.
And I think at that point, like I hadn't really ever traveled. I mean, I think maybe I'd traveled. Yeah, I'd never gone out west before.
They're so chill out there, though. It's so different than you said. New Yorkers are wound up. It's the opposite.
All the times that I spent in like the Bay Area, I found myself kind of like, why is everybody moving so slow?
Right.
Sure. Or like walking around the Mission like 20 years ago and feeling like, where am I going? Like, where is this going? In New York, you feel like you really cover some ground.
Right. And if you don't move fast, somebody knocks you over.
Yeah, because you don't want
to move fast.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, what part of California did you like the most?
I think that I did like LA. I liked LA a little bit more than I liked the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
I think just because one, it's warmer. I'm one of those New Yorkers who I feel like there's a lot of like New Yorkers in LA because it is so different than New York.
Right.
It's basically really like two seasons.
Sure. Right.
The Bay Area, it's Northern California. They have like microclimates inside the Bay, even in San Francisco, because of like how the atmosphere is there, and I like it. I think it's a really cool place, and I love the culture that's there. But I think what I like about LA is that you can go to the beach, you can go hiking in the mountains,
sure,
and you can also take a ride out to the desert. Things that like
those are three very distinct different things
from New York. Absolutely,
right.
Yeah, it's attractive in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, well, we don't have the desert. We do have mountains upstate, and we have beaches out east on the island.
Yeah,
no, no desert.
Yeah, I love our beaches. I mean, I think New York, we have a lot of really fantastic things here.
Did you ever do LSD in the desert?
I didn't do it in the desert.
Oh, okay. Because it seems like if I was in the desert, that would be...
I know. You know what? I never got a chance to do any of those type of formative drugs in California. Right. I did all of them in New York in like the worst possible situation.
Oh, yeah.
or more like very industrial settings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which is sort of like more the New York way, I think.
Right.
It's a little grimier.
By the way, do we have a 4 o'clock in the studio?
They are coming in at 4:30.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we have. I don't have to worry too much about.
No, you got a little. Yeah,
we got a little bit of time
we got
anyway.
Some time in here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's good.
Yeah.
Cool. So what? So we talked a little bit about you growing up here, not a lot, and college, and going west. So what happened between that? You're in your 20s, right?
Yeah.
And now, what have you?
Man, I mean, too many things to get into, but one thing I'll say is that what was really important to me was going back to school. You know?
Right.
Especially because my family was just like you're on your own. What are you going to do?
Right.
And for me, I did want to finish my degree. I just wanted to do it at my own pace,
Right.
But how I ended up going back to school, I was in a film program for a hot minute in my like mid-20s while I was just working a bunch. And I started making films on mini DV. Also, the reason why I'm talking about that now too is because I've been like straightening up my apartment, and I came across all these mini VD tapes that I shot. So I'm going to try to digitize some of that footage. And that's like a lot of the stuff that, my dad actually taught me and my brothers about like sort of how to set up shots and all that kind of stuff. And it lends to being in the studio too. Like it definitely love being able to sort of like pick things apart and work on creating stuff, But when I was making films, I was just like, oh, I really want to learn the finer points of storytelling. I had my version of that because I think New Yorkers all have sort of an inherent way that they approach that. But then I wanted to learn more of the rules so that I could eventually end up breaking them later.
Right.
And I went back to school and...
what school was that?
I went back to CUNY City College.
Okay.
And then after I graduated from there, I went to grad school at Queens College, became a librarian, and I worked for the CUNY system. I worked for a couple community colleges at the time. It was really fulfilling. I loved it. Pandemic happened, got laid off, mass layoff, like all the adjuncts did, So like working here, it's in my blood because as I started to say before, even though we went off track, my maternal...
Yeah, I was just, I didn't forget that.
No,
I was going to bring it back up.
This is how it all comes back. My maternal grandparents owned a second...
No, I actually sat there and I was like, wait, did we finish that story?
Don't worry. I'm bringing it all
cool,
in. I got you in that
good.
one. Yeah, my maternal grandparents owned a secondhand bookstore in the East Village. It started on 4th Avenue, what was known as Book Row.
Mm-hmm.
In the 40s, that's when my grandfather was a book scout, and he sold to like all the different shops. I mean, the history of Book Row from turn of the century, 20s, like just all these like bookstores, like poster shops, antiquarian postcards. Like
it's really fascinating how that there were all different neighborhoods in the old New York City, fashion, meatpacking. That neighborhoods get down here was like fabric and leather and and so
furs
on. So
too.
Furs,
a lot of furriers over here.
And so, how do you think that happened there? The book thing.
Just adjusting this mic. I'm sorry, everybody. I mean, that's it. I feel like.
It just kind of happens. Like one person opens a book and then you say, hey, I'll do that. I don't know. I'm just always curious about that.
I'm not sure. I mean, that's one of those things that, I've read about it. And because my family was so intimately involved in that.
Right.
I think it was just one of those things. Like I remember with my grandmother. So this is a story about my grandparents, my maternal grandparents.
Right.
They met at a communist dance at Webster Hall.
Wow.
In the mid 30s,
okay.
I think.
Wow. Where are they from?
My grandfather was from Vinegar Hill in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And then my grandmother, she actually was born and raised in Auburn, New York.
Okay.
West New York.
But your family lineage.
Yeah, so that's that side. So my grandfather was like a Irish-Scottish mix.
Okay.
And my grandmother's parents were Russian Jews by way of England.
Wow.
So... her mother, my great grandmother, was from Lithuania.
How do you keep track of all this? Is a lot.
I mean, you know what? I get asked a lot, like, "What are you? Where are you from?"
Right.
Because I think I have sort of like this look that could be applied in a lot of.
It really
directions.
could. Yeah.
So a lot of people always question.
And your last
me.
name is Rodriguez.
Yeah, well, that's the other side of the family
other side
too.
Of the family.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm like this sort of like immigrant European mix on one side with the Jews. Obviously, my mother was a Jew. My grandmother, my mother. So technically, I'm a Jew.
Right.
And then my dad's family is from Puerto Rico, and he was born and raised in the South Bronx.
Wow. Okay.
He grew up also in Spanish Harlem, and he made his way down to the Lower East Side in the 70s because he started hanging out, going to this film program that he was a part of. Became friends with a lot of artists.
Uh-huh.
My mom was way off Broadway actress. So I think that my parents met at like a rap party for a film that she was involved in and that he like knew some of the guys at too. So everything happened down here. So so like I was saying before, my grandparents met at this communist dance at Webster Hall, like in the 30s, got together. And then my grandmother was just like, if we're gonna get married, you need to have like a real job.
Right. Well,
like
sure.
being a book scout
sense,
is great, but what are you gonna do with that?
Right.
He's like, well, I don't know. And she's like, well, you know books, and he's like, yeah, I know books. And she's like, so open a store.
Wow. So is your grandmother?
My grandmother was a shrewd, tough-edged woman. She's like, you need to have some money.
Right.
And also, I mean, she was part of sort of that community.
But can you make money in a bookstore?
No, but I mean, I think for the time that they were in operation, like we're talking the 40s until the store started like in 47, around that time. And then the business went out in 91. I was like 8 or 9 years old.
Okay. Why did it go out? Just... they were sick of it, or the money wasn't there? Or?
No, this is the early 90s, so some of the like gentrification stuff was starting.
Okay.
You could start to feel it.
Right.
And then, honestly, it's because Barnes & Noble opened up in the East Village and on Astor Place.
Oh, sure.
So
I remember
a lot of the Barnes & Noble borders, B. Dalton, like all the a lot of chains that don't even exist anymore.
Right.
They started opening up all over the city, and the book culture of 4th Avenue and sort of like a lot of the secondhand bookstores, you know, not all of them survived. Like she was one of the first casualties of that because I'm pretty sure that the landlord sold the building, and that's part of why she needed to get out of there too.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the store was in a couple different locations after my grandfather passed. I never met him, but he passed in 69 when my mom was, I think, 18 or 19. She was really young.
Right.
And my grandmother took over the shop, and she moved it to 7th Street between 3rd and 2nd, like that Cooper Square area, basically across the street from Cooper Union.
Do you have photos of the bookstore?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we have a title on the shelf in the store called Book Row about that time period, and
it's in there.
Yeah, there's a section within a chapter about my grandparents,
and
it has some pictures of them in their shop.
Right.
Yeah, and it moved around on 7th Street, and the last place it was at.
So what's it like for you to see that in a bookstore that you work at? I mean, it must be really, really fantastic for you.
Yeah, I was like, we need to make sure this book is on the
shelf. Okay.
I haven't written a staff pick for it yet because usually I'll just tell people about it. I kind of like to talk to people about it more than I like to necessarily point it out per se. But I don't know. I feel good. I feel like I'm exactly where I should be in this way because of how I grew up and sort of the culture that I come from and want to be a part of too.
Right.
Know?
I had a thought and it disappeared. Well, so do you write?
I do write. Yeah.
So you write poetry. You write prose.
I write a little bit of everything.
Do you ever go out and read?
You know what? I haven't done anything recently. I got thrown off by the pandemic, to be quite honest.
Sure. Well, a lot of people did change lives or put lives on pause.
Oh yeah, and I was really active at the poetry project for a number of years. Like I took classes for a long time.
Did you bring any poetry to read?
Yeah, I have.
Awesome.
I have on my phone, I have a couple poems.
Well, let's get to that.
It's like work in progress too. Yeah. Also, I'm taking a class coming up at the poetry project, but I have I've published in a couple different journals, but it's been a little while, and honestly, the pandemic like kind of threw me off to this point where I'm sort of like I had to get stable again, like financially, find a job, reacclimate, and now I'm feeling like pretty stable where I'm like I'm ready to not just like be in a group writing again, but actually going out.
So you really have to make this happen. You need to have a poetry book by Serge Rodriguez on the shelf.
One of these days, yeah. That's one of the goals. Right?
That would be awesome, right?
Yeah, I usually.
How do you think your grandparents would feel to see that you're here?
I think they'd feel pleased. Yeah, I think they'd be into what the direction is that I'm going,
right?
You know, and this place is a great space along the way,
right?
Part of the journey for sure.
Okay, well, I definitely want to hear your poetry, man. Go to it.
Absolutely. I'm trying to pull up. I don't usually use my phone.
Yeah, me neither. I like paper.
I like paper too, but this morning I was in a rush and I wasn't able to get everything together.
Not a problem, man.
I'm going to read it off my phone.
This is great.
So this is actually a poem that I submitted to No Deer magazine and was published. And actually in the midst of right as the pandemic started. Actually, now that I realize it, in 2020. This is about This is about some friends of mine. One of my closest friends who's also from the Lower East Side. She now lives in the Bronx. Actually, there's a lot of friends of mine that left the neighborhood and ended up in the Bronx. There's a community of Lower East Siders that are up there.
Okay.
And this is basically...
Is that because of financial reasons?
Definitely financial reasons. Yeah, just getting pushed out of the neighborhood because they can't afford to live here, even though they grew up here. But this one is inspired by sort of like the journey. And also for me too, because my dad's from the South Bronx. Like I feel a real kinship with the Bronx and still
you have so many circles going.
I do.
You really do, man.
Yeah. I think that's part of like what it is to be a New Yorker,
never heard
right?
anything like this. Yeah.
Yeah, where you're like a blend of all the things that, make the city run in its own specific way. So this poem is for my good friends, and it's for the Bronx, and it's for a family and the notion of home, and how you create that as you go with the people around you, no matter where you are. It's inside of you. The name of this poem is called Bronx Roast Chicken Treehouse.
Nice title.
Yeah, thank you. Right. 1. La Luna and I roost together atop Summit Ave. An eighth of Kush spins lavender kaleidoscope, watching stratus clouds crisscross the rush hour Major Deacon, watching some white people walk over the Macomb Dam's footbridge. From La Luna's window, wondering how long before we're asking for advice about where to go next. For a bottle of Fabuloso, for kin, for trodden floorboards, where we'll be adding gondolas to every dish to stretch it out, because the 1st and the 15th leave us as fast as exhalations turn thoughts over to nostalgia, and La Luna is ready to hum low tunes of lives left behind in the LES. Call us home for dinner time. A roast chicken from Molino Rojo, torn limb by limb for our hungry sons. Our jovial monstruo, a Bronx boy, a brand of sheen. Gaseous mists expand, the last swirl of starch leaves the rice washed in a pot full of ghosts. Call them home for dinner time. Climb Bronx slopes for dinner time. 8 mottled plantains for $2, 3 for the cupboard, 2 on top of the fridge, 3 cut at an angle and plopped into a sizzling pan, salt flaked, orange juice, no pulp, in a brightly colored quart box set aside ice cold for long hot showers at La Luna's request. It's Tio time. 2. Listen up, baby Jupiter, sparkle eyes. Save some abalone wishes and wow for mama's milk, cupped from La Luna's sacred nectar receptor, holding holy hand to heart and pumping to plump him up. See me. I'm Fairy Tio, a lazy boy of downtown lore. Your mommy learned to conjure Chespirito, Chapulín, El Chavo del Ocho, occasionally Cantinflas, and I'm the long-lost Marx brother, the ones who make the most of what they've got, without a lot to boast about. Tio loves to dare or coax, a chuckle, a cheesy grin on this many-moon child's face from a cheesestay out of nothing, out of nowhere, your nose, your ear, a quarter, a stupid look, a slice of pizza from Rosario's, a glance out of your cradle of moonbeams emerge from every long Stanton Street hallway, heavy steps, every 2nd Avenue tunnel to run through, wow, fat baby Jupiter, thick thighs and round booty, peals of joy, squiggle, break north, Scotti brays to mama, the Bronx is hollering at us, New Yorican fathers from uptown know the bop, big brother's greasy hands rest on this belief, it's our b-ball hope. Family is not a singular fixed constellation. It's a strong wave that calls us home for dinner time. Everyone loves you in this treehouse called the Bronx, warm and rich from roast chicken and laughter.
That was absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
Really unbelievable.
Thanks, man.
I'm spellbound.
Oh,
it's so
I appreciate it.
New York and culture and everything, man. Wow.
It's important to me.
And I love the way you read it too.
Thank you.
So you got to go out and do this, man.
Oh yeah, I will.
Yeah.
It's important for me, I think, in a way, as a New Yorker, and sort of the conversation we're having. Yeah, working Lower East Side, being here, living here, like feeling rooted to place, but also like the idea of place is something that you create with people.
Right. Sure.
You know.
Right.
And that's the thing that keeps memory alive.
Right.
You know.
We don't have a lot more time,
Okay.
and we got somebody else coming in, so it takes time to close up. Can you read something else?
Let me see what I got on hand. I have some works in progress. Unfortunately, like I respect whatever artists have to do, But I do use my notes app occasionally just to jot down stuff because I don't.
I wrote my book on
Get out
on
of
the
here.
notes app.
I love hearing that.
It stinks as far as an app goes, you know, because
It's
it's really
awful.
not. It's really hard to navigate. But
Absolutely.
I never wrote. I never sat down. I edit on the laptop.
Yeah.
I write on there because I write when I'm out and doing things.
Yeah. I love that. I always used to call the poems I wrote walking poems because they'd be going on in my mind when I'd be walking.
And your poem is very musical. I mean, you know what you got to
Yeah.
do is you got to marry the two.
I was thinking.
I would love to hear that with some congas in the background.
That'd be cool. Yeah,
It's
that would be
like
really dope. That's
you
a
know,
great
so-
idea. I've thought about that in the past, but that's a nice, helpful word of encouragement
Right.
to get from you.
Because
on that
your
one.
poem was very musical.
Yeah, music is a huge part of
Right.
it.
And food too, man. I love the description of the
food-
food in that, man.
Yeah, food always does.
I
it
love
for
the
me, too.
cutting up the plantains in the cupboard on the fridge and cutting up in the and what'd you say 45-degree angle.
At a 45-degree angle. Yeah, exactly.
That was so cool.
Yeah, I mean, you know, food, that kind of stuff, anything that really brings up the notion of home and what you share with people
Right.
is a big part of it for me, you
Yep.
know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to see if I have a lot of like weirdo. This is a short one.
I
Very,
like
very short.
weirdo.
Yeah. This isn't like crazy, but
Okay.
okay. Dating the local deity. When others ask what she looks like, I say, listen, if she wanted to reveal herself to you, she'd do it.
Wow. Cool.
A little short one.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see if I have one more. Boom, 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 boom.
Well, hopefully at some point in the near future, I'll be coming to P T Knitwear bookstore for one of the events, and it'll be you up there reading.
Yeah,
Why
actually,
don't you read for Wayne's thing?
I was just gonna say, you know, he's asked me in the past, like, would you ever want to do it? And I'm like, okay.
I'm gonna tell him he has to talk you into it because you got to read that one, man.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
yeah, I'd love to read that one. I read that when we did the No Deer magazine launch.
Nice.
That one, it was on Zoom, which is nice,
Right.
but you know, and that was what we had to do during the pandemic. But there's nothing like being in a crowd of people,
Sure. Right.
reading your poems and then talking with them, talking back to them. So I think I have one more. It's actually, I'll try to do it sort of quick.
Yeah, well, we're not in that much of a rush. You got time.
We got a little time for sure.
Yeah. I just don't want to infringe upon the people coming on after.
Oh
us.
no,
Yeah.
I think it'll be all right.
All right.
Let me see if I can find. This is the thing about using the phones for this. It's much
I know
nicer to.
it's really hard.
Yeah, that's what I don't.
sometimes.
Okay, this one is called Bone Tongue. Here's the blueprint. Here's the expectation, but no, wait. Here's reality. It works in a funny way, like expressions that follow geography, that follow the mood of the speaker. My brother tilts his head and darts eyes over at me, like a quizzical dog trying to understand our father's mangled Spanish, how he speaks with someone in his mind. His head is down, thinking of another. For a long time, we've always known we're a gray people. It was 1970 when Pop tossed my oldest brother out the window on Tiffany Street up in the Bronx. Building was up in flames for the fourth time that summer, and there was no fire department on the way. My brother's tiny body was tossed like a sandbag into a net of hands. But first, unfortunately, as the story goes, fabled in my father's retelling, he had to break his arms. Chop! Poor kid had gone into shock. The acrid and heavy smell of the smoke froze him in place. He was standing in a doorway while Pop was getting high in the next room with Uncle Eddie. People started yelling from outside. My brother's arms shot out and he latched onto the molding of the door frame, anchoring himself in place. Gano, Luis, Papo, other young men in the building swiftly assembled like human lattice work, forming an internal corridor on the fire escape, passing children between their arms, legs, thighs, their muscles full of adrenaline, bodies organized into a steady unison, a conveyor belt, a passage. You can train the body to do anything to withstand the unthinkable. It works like the measures we take to keep things intact, just for now, in the hope that the moment extends. Most of us are forced into motion, things unseen, things we know and live without, expressions that change, expressions that mean something. We also make meanings. We make meanings to settle these disruptions. Motion is an invisible consequence like fire or other processes that end one state and begin another. Entropy, they call it. All our lives we've been living to die. You're born to die, sweetheart. my Aunt Marion cupped my face, my splotchy radio flyer face. You're born to die, sweetheart.
Holy cow! You know what's funny is, like I said, I've known you for how long I've been doing this, and I guess we mostly talk about the podcast studio or the Knicks.
It's true. Yeah, we haven't.
But it's always
about
quick in and out. I'm doing this. You're busy.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about doing this podcast, because you get to sit down, you get to talk to somebody and find out about their life. So I didn't know you did all this stuff, and glad to hear that you're a fantastic writer too.
Thank you so much, Pete. It's a huge honor to be asked to come in and chat with you.
Man.
I really appreciate it.
I've been wanting to do this for the longest time, and it finally happened.
Thank you again. I'm glad we got a chance to do this. Perfect day for it too, rainy outside.
And I hope it leads to other things for you.
Yeah, I'm getting back into the swing of things. I'm starting to get back to writing, and I'm loving it.
Right.
And
you have to, because you know what? Those poems that you read.
Thank you.
I would love to read them on paper, because there's so much going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Especially the first one you read, there was so much detail. And
there was a lot of detail there.
Yeah. And man, wow.
Do you feel like when you're writing, like sometimes I feel like I'm talking to somebody and I'm not sure who it is.
Right.
And as I continue to write, I let go of that.
Right. I feel that. I mean, honestly, I'm not a kid. So I'm going to be 66 soon. And
that's hard to believe.
Oh,
Can't
thanks.
believe it, man.
So, I never wrote. I mean, I always thought I stunk at it. I was in a punk band and I wrote 2 songs. I don't think that counts. And whenever I would write something, I would like roll it up and throw it away in disgust.
Really?
Yeah, I always thought it was terrible. I didn't take writing classes.
Yeah.
But it just started. It just started to happen.
I love
some
that.
of it was... some stress I was going through, and I felt it kind of got out. And
writing is amazing.
And
for that.
I don't know if I'm a great writer or not. I feel like I tell stories, and
I love that.
in sometimes really short amount of time.
Yeah.
And that's what for me it's about. And sometimes I don't know where they come from. It just kind of happens.
That's the beauty of it. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing too. Like writers or artists, they really are. I think there's too many slick distinctions about you do this, you do that, and you have to be good this way or that way. I think it's about playing around. And I think
art, music, all of this that we've been talking about, and food, culture, it's all what makes us human.
Absolutely.
And you know what?
That's the resonance.
You shouldn't do something just like, well, I'm not going to do this because I'm not good at it. Just if you love doing it. And that for me, I wound up really like doing it, and I love this. I like what we're doing, and I love being on a stage. So
yeah, that's the best part. The thing I would say too is, I don't know if you have this experience, but sometimes what I've written and what I read, it becomes more improvisational for me. So it's like I don't follow every line to the letter.
Right.
But I think that there's something special about being in that space where you get to just make that poem pop out a little bit more than you had initially conceived it. Even.
Well, they're two different things. I mean, writing is very personal.
Absolutely.
And then reading it and being in front of an audience is not it's entertainment, but it's expression, and it's of the moment.
That's a good point.
It's of the moment.
Yeah, they are two different things, and I love the marriage of the both of them.
I love doing both, and now I'm doing some with music. If you're here that night,
I'll come through.
Yeah, you'll see.
Awesome.
So then you're putting something else to it too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great.
Well, sometimes the best shows are the ones that just kind of happen or kind of improvised, and this was fantastic. I'm so glad you were on the show, and I learned so much about you and about history and everything else.
Thanks so much, Pete. It was an honor to be here with you.
So you've been listening to Storyteller on Orchard Street with my guest Serge Rodriguez. He's the general manager of the podcast studio, and he works out here in the bookstore. After hearing him read and talking about his life, you can come by, say hello, and have a latte or buy a book. Storyteller on Orchard Street is in the P T Knitwear bookstore studio, 180 Orchard Street. Once again, thank you, Serge, and thank you all for hanging out and listening. Yep.